we are going to talk about derivatives of trigonometric and inverse trigonometric functions. We're going to start with trigonometric derivatives. So just a little review. A trigonometric function is the function of an angle that returns the ratio of two given sides of a right triangle. And there are 6 trigonometric functions. The trigonometric functions are sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. We will not show any of their graphs because their graphs are all different. Some are similar in certain ways. You can just look them up if you want to see what the graphs look like. In general, it is not very difficult to differentiate trigonometric functions, but there is some memorization involved because each trigonometric function has its own derivative and you should know what they are. So I'm going to write down now what the derivatives of each of them are. We'll start with sine. The derivative of sine of x is defined to be cosine of x. That's the first one. The next one is the derivative of cosine x is negative sine x. That's the second one. The third one is the derivative of tangent of x, which is secant squared. The fourth one is the derivative of cosecant, which is negative cosecant times cotangent. The fifth derivative is the derivative of secant, which is secant times tangent. And the derivative of the sixth and final one is cotangent. And the derivative of that is negative cosecant squared. And as I just mentioned, you really should know the derivatives of these functions because they come up a lot and they're important. And now that we have these derivatives now, we're going to talk about the derivatives of inverse trigonometric functions. And the inverse trigonometric functions are what they sound like. They're the inverse of the 6 trigonometric functions. So there are 6 of them, and the 6 inverse trigonometric functions are arcsine, arccosine, arctangent, arccosecant, arcsecant, and arccotangent. And again, the derivatives of these really need to be memorized, and they're pretty important, and you should know what they are. So I'm going to list them like I just did with the trigonometric functions. We'll start with arcsine. The derivative of arcsine is 1 all over the square root of 1 minus x squared. That's the first one. The next one is arccosine, and the derivative of arccosine is simply the negative of the derivative of arcsine. It's negative 1 all over the square root of 1 minus x squared. The third inverse trigonometric function is arctangent. The derivative of arctangent is 1 all over 1 plus x squared. That is the third important one to know. The fourth inverse trigonometric function is arcsecant, and the derivative of arcsecant is 1 all over the absolute value of x times the square root of x squared minus 1. That's the fourth one. The fifth one is arccosecant, and the derivative of arccosecant is the negative of the derivative of arcsecant, which is negative 1 all over the absolute value of x times the square root of x squared minus 1. And finally, we have arccotangent, which is And the derivative of arccotangent is the negative of arctangent. So it's -1 all over 1 plus x squared. And so those are the 6 derivatives of the inverse trigonometric functions. And as I said, they really should be memorized because they're important. Now, in general, it is important to know the derivatives of trigonometric and inverse trigonometric functions because they come up a lot, and if you see a function containing one, you will now know how to differentiate it. In some cases, you may need to use another rule of differentiation, like the product, quotient, or chain rule, but that usually isn't too hard. And that is some information on derivatives of trigonometric and inverse trigonometric functions.